Hello, this is David Baumblatt from Terabint Leadership. Today, we are going to be talking about America's Generation X, and we're going to look at the leadership points in there. The one thing before we're going to go into the news and some other events to explain it. But the first thing I want to let known is every generation feels like either their generation's the best or this is not the point. Obviously, I'm Generation X, and in many ways, the baby boom generation, which could quite possibly looked upon as the worst generation, is what it is. That is my opinion. But I'm not saying Generation X is all that great. But Leadership 101, who is in charge of America now? It's the baby boom generation. But Generation X is also starting to either already have the leadership mantle of America or soon will be becoming the leadership. So what does that mean for leadership? Well, look, how's America doing? If America is doing well, then you credit the leadership. If America is not doing well, then you blame the leadership. So before Generation X says, hey, we're awesome, we're great, well, America's not doing very good. Now, if we feel that when we become the mantles of leadership post-baby boom generation and we fix America, that's another story. But I've said many times, no one's going to fix America. This place is going to go to collapse. It's going to go to revolution, go to civil war. But anyway, I do want to talk about the Generation X a little bit to understand that. But first, let's go to some news here, and then we'll kind of go into Generation X. First thing I'd always like to do, 4 quick articles in X. This person, his name is Leah Rain. Leah, I don't know. I've went to her many times. So she's the typical, she's all MAGA man, she's all Christian. And we're going to assume that she doesn't know who I am. Because we all know that if these MAGA Christian people, if they did know who I am, what would they do? They would support a military veteran. Again, I've said I support Donald Trump. But so it's the same thing, like I said many times. We've seen this deal play out with the liberals when they say, liberals, do you support illegal immigration or whatever immigration? And they say, absolutely. And you say, hey, would you be willing to house an illegal in your house? And it's like, no. Same thing with MAGA. MAGA, do you support military veterans? Absolutely. Well, then why wouldn't you repost this guy, David Baumblatt? He's a military veteran, government, something like that. So anyway, let's go back to her. And what is she talking about? You know, what she's saying, I'm not disagreeing. She's like we're being, tolerant, inclusive, open-minded, and we are being conquered. And what was my reply to her? White men have already been conquered by white women. I mean, we are the matriarchy in America. And again, that's why we let women the right to vote. That was horrible. But if you think about it, and this goes, before we go, let's talk about leadership. Let me put this up. This is an important thing. People say sometimes, and I'm looking at the white man, like, how do we fix this system? Well, part of leadership is before you focus on the macrocosm, focus on the microcosm. Before you think you could stand up to the government, before you could stand up to immigrants, before you could stand up to any of these other issues that are facing, can you even stand up to your girlfriend, to your wife? I mean, most of these guys are cucks. So I would say that. But literally, part of the reason why white women don't respect white men is because we don't have power. They walk over us. So again, before you want to become, as a white man, a Superman in America and save the day, I don't know, why don't you stand up for your rights to white women? And trust me, on face value, white women or even cuck white men would find this very insulting. At the end of the day, though, white women would actually appreciate it because they're biologically not engineered to appreciate or be attractive to weak men. They want to be strong men. So anyway, back to Leia's point on this, how did we get conquered by these immigrants? Well, I don't know. How can we expect white men to stand up to immigrants if you don't even stand up to white women? I've said many times, white women should have never been allowed the right to vote. And if you're a white woman and you find that insulting, well, if you want the right to vote, then you need to share equal power, which is what you want, equal responsibilities. And women don't. They don't want equal responsibilities. So along this line, let's go to another one here. But anyway, thanks, Leah. I assume she's going to say, I never heard about this guy, David Baumblatt. Let's assume that. Because if she did, I'm sure she would be a MAGA person, 100%, and she'd repost and support military veterans. So anyway, let's go here. This woman, his name is Sadie. Look at her. She's another MAGA, all the way MAGA. Okay, that's fine. And then what did she say? She's like, no way. I mean, look at this dude here in a bikini. What did I write? This is what feminism is. This is what you wanted. What does feminism bring? It brings girly men. It brings masculine women. This is what you want. She's a feminist. This is where a lot of MAGA women would disagree with me and say, we're not. Yes, you are. You're a feminist. You wanted the right to vote. You wanted equal power. This is what you get. But in the meantime, Sadie, I'm sure you also have a great excuse. You've never heard about me. Maybe it is, but I'm sure if you did, you would support military veterans, because that's what this fake cult MAGA team is all about. It's basically like the liberals. They say one thing and they don't do another thing. Then let's go to this final two things here. Let's just talk about this quick. This guy, his name's Derek Van Oden. Hopefully, let me just talk about him a little bit in other videos. So hopefully you see him. He's a congressman. So let's just talk quickly about Derek Van Oden here. Let me see anyway. So if anyone knows Derek Van Oden, if you remember, I did an interview with, man, I forget it. It must have been like months ago. Or no, it must have been a year ago. I did an interview with this broadcast company, some type of, anyway, it's a podcast. And they had interviewed Derek Van Oden. Now, Derek is a congressman, so that puts him in a very different position than a civilian. He works. He's a former Navy SEAL, which I think most of the Navy SEALs are pussies. It's bullshit. And if any Navy SEAls find this insulting, well, guess what? I'm going to show you what one of your shitbag Navy SEAls is doing, and you're going to realize why you're a bunch of overrated shitbags. So remember, Derek Van Oden is a retired Navy SEAL. So he spent his career leeching off the American taxpayer money in the military, and now he's a congressman. So he's not a civilian. He has a duty, and he takes your tax money. I have written Derek Oden's, I guess it's his secretary of his admin person. She knows about me. And the host that I interviewed with, he had also interviewed actually Derek Van Oden, and he reached out to him and said, hey, why are you ignoring this guy, David Baumblatt? Now, if you see on this Twitter, like I've done, let me bring this up. I've written this guy so many times. It would be astronomically impossible for him not to know who I am now. Again, send emails. So then here we go. Let's go back to this. So here we have a U.S. congressman. It's a bullshit Navy SEAL. Like I said, I would give you my feelings on Navy SEAls. I want to do it now. They should be defunded. They should stick with what they were meant to do, which were underwater demolition teams, frogmen. Now you got Navy SEAls in the mountains. They call them mountain SEAls. No, that's what the Army Rangers do. That's what the Green Berets do. That's what Delta. It's the typical corporation. Now you got Navy SEAls. They're doing everything. So there is a need for these Navy SEAls. They are the sons of the what's called the UDTs, underwater demolition teams. Now they're overrated and it's bullshit. Everyone wants them to write books. So now, Derek, I'm looking at you. You're a piece of shit, Derek, and you make the Navy SEAls look like piece of shit. You have a duty, Derek. You are a congressman. Your money comes from the American public now. You're not a civilian. You've been leeching off the American taxpayer your whole life because you're too stupid, you're too lazy, and you're too afraid. Yes, too afraid to get a real job. I'll do many stories with my time in the military. It's overrated. So you know who I am. Why are you ignoring me, Derek? Are you afraid? Probably. Are you lazy? Probably. Do you just not give a fuck? Probably. All check. And that's why you're a Navy SEAL. You're a piece of shit for the Navy SEAls. You have a duty. You should answer me and do part of my allegation is do an investigation to find out if my allegation, which is true or not. But you don't ignore. If you're a civilian, then yeah, you have a luxury. Even though you're a Navy SEAL, you should still help out military veterans. You're not. You're a congressman. You have a duty. But that's why Navy SEAls are shitbags these days. I'm not impressed with Navy SEAls. And if Navy SEAls find anything what I'm saying insulting or wrong, then you ask yourself on whatever principles the SEAL teams have taught you. If you're a military veteran or if you're a congressman and a military veteran says, I have government corruption to report, do you A, ignore, or do you two, acknowledge and communicate with that person? And if you're not quite sure the answer to that, it shows again why Navy SEAls are overrated. But that's again, this guy is Derek Van Oden here, and he is one big shitbag who's leeched off the government for his entire life. Let's go to the next one here, and here we come. So now, one second, let me make sure we have this here. Let me make sure this is up. Okay, so now we have Gretchen Smith. Now, to give her a little credit, Gretchen Smith, I believe, is a civilian. That makes it different. Now, Gretchen is supposedly a military veteran. Hopefully you could see this. And she's all about helping military veterans. Gretchen blocked me on this, okay, which makes, well, I'm sure she has a good reason. So when you block me, that's a good reason. That's a good point that she probably knows who I am because she clicked on the button. She obviously blocked me. So now the question is, besides, why is a military veteran, Gretchen, she's Air Force and she talks about helping other people. Why would she block me? Why would she not help out? And here is, we're just going to end it here, but that's Gretchen Smith. And what's the leadership on this? Well, let's use common sense. This is leadership 101. I need to do this story too. I've said this why I need to do this. Gretchen, this is to the American public. Do you think I am the only military veteran she's ever done this to, where I said, I need help, Gretchen. I have government corruption to report. You don't need to give me any money. Just repost. And she's like, instead of putting my faggot finger, she's a whore. Instead of putting my whorish finger on the repost button, I decided to put it on the block button. What a piece of shit. Now, here's the question. Do you think I'm the only person that she's ever done this to, military veteran? It could be, but if it is, wow, that's a big deal. Or she might do this with other people, which then shows, why would she ever serve in the military to begin with? Now, people might put me on the spot and said, hey, David, have you helped out military my whole life? Now, since I've become public, I have to admit, I have changed my views of military veteran. So now if you come to me, and I'm making this known now, if you say, David, I'm a military veteran and I need help, my response now is, wait a minute, what type of military veteran are you? Because these military veterans are a piece of shit. The same military veterans where the FBI recruited West Pointers to spy on me. But before that, I always helped out military veterans. Even I wrote it in my book, I was suspended from the FBI 2 weeks, unpaid leave, and I gave $8,000 of my money to a military veteran, meaning that was why I helped this person out. He was a black guy, if that helps. But I looked upon him as a military veteran. I have no regrets. And I even admitted to the FBI what I did was wrong, nothing criminal, but I shouldn't have got involved so much. But that was always what I'd done. And now what type of help am I asking military veterans to do? Don't give me any money, just press repost. And they don't do it? No way. I've always done this. My entire life, I've always done it. But now in the future, I may not. Like I said, just because you're a military veteran, and I've said to the American people, I don't know why you keep saying thank you for your service to military veterans. I have total respect to a civilian that says, David, I could care less that you are a military veteran. I don't support military veterans, and you guys could go fuck yourself. I have zero arguments in the world. That's why I don't go to the liberals, even though some of them may support military veterans. I only go to MAGA because MAGA says they love to support military veterans. And it's bullshit. It's the best example, like I keep saying, the liberal says, I will support illegal aliens. And you say, will you house them? No. MAGA, I totally support military veterans. Well, can you press repost for David? No, doesn't make any sense. So that's it from there. So what I want to do is, let me see some comments, then we'll go into it. Shane, it just, the whole thing, and let me give, well, I was going to give the example, but let me at least talk about women in the military. If women want to join the military, they can, but I would just make all the standards one standard, and what would happen? 90% of military, 90% of the women would quit the military. Generally speaking, women have no place in the military, except if it's admin. We used to have what's called the Army Nurse Corps, this and that, but whatever. If you're a woman, if you want to join the military, you can, but if the standards were the same, it's not going to happen. But I don't want to go into that. We could do another video on that. I don't have a problem, but I'm just saying, if you look at America, why is America falling apart? I've said this many times. Military veterans, it's about 1% of the American public. If military veterans cannot come together as a brotherhood or sisterhood, do you think America's going to come? And even with Trump as the president, and I agree, they're pushing this no DEI and they're firing a lot of generals and whatever. I'm not going to argue with it, but I'm telling you, there are pissed off people in the military, like meaning the military is fracturing people. It's fracturing. And one of the great things that you're seeing for me is I've never reached out to military veterans to ask for help until now. And I'm showing you as a civilian here my situation so you could read the temperature in America to see, are our systems working? Are we still cohesive? We're just talking about military veterans. And unless you think my story is an anomaly, like, well, David, the military veterans are not helping you, because you're an anomaly. You're a bad egg. But I'm sure they'd help other people. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if you talk to many military veterans that are homeless or whatever, or talk even to the enlisted people, what they think about officers, it's falling apart. But you should be able to see my example, especially this guy, Derek Van Oden, who's a piece of shit Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs are overrated. I need to do videos on it. Hey, I even believe West Point, when it comes to leadership, has also gotten overrated. West Point used to be the creme de la creme of leaders. I'm not going to put my back. I mean, I'm going to give West Point a very beneficial a judgment, and I'm going to say maybe 50% of West Point graduates who come out, where you as a civilian would be like, wow, top of the line leader. I think I'm being gracious. I'm going to say 50%. The other 50%, I think you as a civilian would be like, where the hell did my tax money go? I'm not impressed with him as a leader. Same thing with these Navy SEALs. So Derek Van Oden, to all you Navy SEAls out there, to show that you're pride man, you're all about American patriots, you're not afraid, you're not lazy. This guy, Derek Van Oden, who's a congressman, is a representative of the SEAL community. He's a congressman. He's an absolute shitbag. He's a coward and he's a fucking traitor. But when a military veteran says, hey, Derek, you little dick faggot Navy SEAL, I got I have government corruption report, you respond. I've been in many fights with Navy SEAls, meaning they'll come, we'll do boxing. I've kicked the shit out of many Navy SEAls. Remember, they could do their push-ups, they could do their sit-ups, they could run. In a fight 1-to-1, I would knock the shit out of them. And why? Because I've said many times, we're going to talk about Generation X. There is a lack, and I'm not saying Generation X. Again, this program is not about Generation X is all cool or not. We'll get into it. But I'm saying part of leadership, we need to bring back, particularly to white men, a sense of hand-to-hand combat. Because hand-to-hand combat, you call it what you want. Maybe it's called martial arts. Maybe it's called boxing. Maybe it's called MMA. But that hand-to-hand combat, I am telling you, that is a cauldron to build leadership. When I stepped in the ring and I fucking bounced heads with some of the big heavyweights, it builds character. And I'm telling you, I've met a lot of these special operations people. When I smack them fucking hard enough in the head, they will fucking be intimidated. This guy, Derek, you're a piece of shit, Derek. I would beat your fucking ass and your low DNA kids in a heartbeat. You're an embarrassment to the Navy SEALs. You're an embarrassment to military veterans. And you are an embarrassment to America. A military veteran with government corruption reaches out to you. This is not an option now. You leech off the American taxpayer, you have a duty. And I could say this for many other. Same thing with this Luttrell guy, which that story's bullshit. You can tell me I'm going on a tangent, but let's get back to Generation X. And here we come. I'm reading the comments. Shane, I'll get to your comments here because I see it. But let me just show you this. This is how faggoty the military has become now. Don't fool yourself. These Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and Green Berets, I have no doubt that one of the reasons that they don't want to talk to me is they probably labeled me as a racist. I have no doubt. And so that's what I want to emphasize this. I don't consider myself to be the normal Generation X for two reasons. One, my lifestyle in America was very different. Going to West Point, going in the military, going in the FBI, because these generational, I guess you could call them personalities or psychosis, have to do with your cultural environment. So whether you raise with technology, raised with certain cultures, that's how it defines us. So by going into the military, it's a very different culture than 99% of other Generation X people. The second, I've been in China for 15 years. That's why when we talk about Generation X, we're only talking about Americans. So if you were raised in a different country, it's totally different. The amount of racism that I've seen in China, especially being a racial minority, has totally changed my mind. Has totally changed my mind. And I will say things, I have no doubt that these MAGA people, for the same retardedness that they look at liberals for being retarded, like the liberals they say are triggered, I guarantee I will say racist things, and these weak cuck MAGA people would be like, dude, he's a racist, I can't handle it. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just look at example number one here. Let's bring it on stage. Now, this is The Breakfast Club. Now, I'm not saying this movie's like all great, but this would have been, this is 1985. Hopefully you see the picture. What's one of the first things I think about this picture? They're all white people. Notice that? There's all white people. You don't see black people in this picture. There's no Asian people. I don't even know if there were lesbians. There could have been some bisexuality, but we're talking about the men. I don't think any of the men were homosexual. So the point being is right here, looking at that right there, what do you think a lot of the MAGA people would say? Now, of course, there are hardcore MAGA people that I would probably agree with, but I'm saying the conventional MAGA people, they'd say, I don't like this guy, David Hall. That's a racist statement. Well, that's why you're a cock. But that's the first thing, think about it. You don't think The Breakfast Club is an iconic Generation X movie. I'm not saying it was great. I watched it as a kid, and it is what it is. And I thought that little thing about the video sounded cool as an advertisement. But the first thing I noticed was these are the star characters in the movie. They're all white. The men, at least, I don't remember the women. I can't remember the movie, but the men, I'm pretty sure the men were heterosexual. Again, if women are bisexual or whatever, there's a little bit different. That's another video I could talk about. The men are all heterosexual. They're probably all Christian or Christian oriented. I think I mentioned already they're all white and this and that. What do you think would happen in today's movie? Even Disney, there's got to be a black person. There's got to be an Asian person. There's got to be a homosexual person. And even if you go into the special operations military, they would even say, these are the tough Army Rangers. They would say, dude, that's totally off base, man. We're all Americans and there's no race with any of us. Yeah, good luck with that, you fucking idiot. Because I'm telling you, where has America gone? If you're Generation X and we are now becoming more and more responsible, let me remove this. We are becoming Generation X, soon to hold the leadership realm. Meaning my West Point classmates should be making one-star generals soon. So the baby boomers are still in charge. But Generation X, we are literally on the doorstep. So the point is how's America doing? How are we doing with this thing called diversity? How are we doing with this thing called feminism? How are we doing with this thing called global capitalism? It's not working. Even I was gonna do a clip of Gavin Newsom. No, I'm not supporting any Democrats. Not like I really support any Republicans. I truly believe Trump was different. He still is different, but not as much as I wanted to. Anyway, Gavin Newsom is also saying the same thing I'm saying. He goes, our country's going down, that the future generations of Americans are not going to have it good as their parents. And I've said many times to the audience people, our systems aren't working. By you seeing me talking here, they're not working. Now, what I can give you is this. The solution that I'm saying, which is nationalism, well, it's definitely different than what the liberals, Democrats are saying. So we can argue about the solution. But now, what has totally changed is when I left America in 2010, it wasn't mainstream that America has a major problem, that we're going to collapse. It's mainstream now. It's totally mainstream. So that's changed. But you could still argue with me and say, David, I agree with you. We have a problem. But this thing called nationalism that you're doing, that sounds like Adolf Hitler. And I'm totally against racism. And I can't talk with you because even though I'm a MAGA, if you're a racist, I get triggered and that's it. Have fun. You go have fun with that. But anyway, you kind of see that our country's not doing very well. What we're going to do is I'll read the comments right now. Let's just do a quick video on Generation X. The one thing that I would agree that Generation X is different. This was in my lifetime. But again, like I said, I still think I'm very different with China and in the military. But Generation X, and I keep saying, what are the two things that keep going forward in our life? Globalism and technology. Does anyone not agree with that? And I'm not saying I'm pro-globalism. I've said I'm a nationalist. And I like technology, but I think we're going to get chipped, like in the Bible. I mean, we are going to get the mark of the beast. But all I'm saying is you don't agree that technology and globalism have been constant. It's constant. So what am I saying? When I grew up in New York, Generation X, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. We were probably the first generation that had what's called video games. I don't know. Has anyone ever heard of Atari, Nintendo, ColecoVision? I think it was called Sega. I think we were literally the first generation that had video games, which was amazing. But then by the time cell phones came out and this and that, and I'm going to show this video, but I want to make a point on this. This is not going to be a crypto episode, but we do need to talk about economics. Now, I've said many times, I am absolutely a supporter of gold. or silver, whatever. You better get, this economy is going to collapse. But I keep talking about technology and I keep talking about globalism. I want to talk about crypto and how Generation X is. And I'm going to relate it. But when I talk about crypto, I am not talking about cryptocurrencies. Some are going to do well, and most of them are going to be shit coins. I don't even know if Bitcoin is going to do well. I want to talk about blockchain technology. And I don't want you to get too confused. It's sort of like saying the internet, blockchain technology, and then saying Bitcoin, Google, Yahoo, like all these other ones. So what are the cryptocurrencies? And a lot of them are going to go to zero, people. But this thing called blockchain technology, think of the internet. I remember when I was a West Point cadet and I had to take computer science class, and they were introducing us to the internet. And I have to admit, I was just blown away. I didn't understand this. Like the teacher, he was a major. He was a U.S. major, a major in the U.S. Army, and he was my professor, computer science, and this was like computer science 101. And we had computers, and he's literally showing us what the internet is. And he's like, I remember, he's like, well, type in something that you're interested in. I said, what? Just type it. He goes, what are you interested in? I think I just typed in balloons. I'm like, I don't know, balloons. He's like, well, type in balloons. And I typed in balloons and I pressed search. And I remember these. Now it wasn't as many as it now. Now with the internet, I mean, there's so many. I think there might have been maybe 9 or 10 websites or whatever pop up with balloons. And I asked him, I said, where is this coming from? He goes, it's coming from the World Wide Web. And I still didn't understand this concept. Like, what is this? I'm still looking at a magical box called a computer. But think about it back then. What if someone said, this internet thing's a joke, it's a scam, it's never going to do well? Remember, I worked for Amazon. The whole basis of Amazon was the internet. We're communicating here on the internet. So I think we should all agree that the internet, for good or for bad, has revolutionized our life. But I was part of the generation that saw the inception. So if you're younger than me, you just grew up knowing that the internet was just awesome or whatever. It's mainstream. I wasn't. I grew up seeing this internet, and there were people saying, this internet thing's weird. It's going to go away. Or all you do on the internet is just send emails. That's it. The internet has blown up. What do I think with blockchain technology? I believe it's going to be the same thing because I've witnessed that as Generation X. I believe blockchain technology, and I keep it, is going to revolutionize our life. And just like the internet uses certain internet search, and you're going to see China move in, because in China they use what's called Baidu. Baidu is their Google. But during the internet, there were many competitions. What is it called? America Online, like all these different internet companies. A lot of them failed. And only the big 3 or whatever won, like Google and Yahoo or whatever. I believe that same thing is going to happen with crypto, where blockchain technology is going to go mainstream in terms of financial transactions in the world. What cryptocurrencies are going to be used for this, that's the gamble. Obviously, Bitcoin has been the big one. I'm actually betting against Bitcoin, but I believe there will be utility cryptos, and it'll be used gold too. It'll be digitally backed gold. Meaning gold will always be there. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because this is the things you can learn from generations. Because if you're younger than me, you don't realize you probably grew up with a cell phone, a computer, and the internet, and you thought, yeah, man, this stuff was always on top. No, it wasn't. I mean, there were people that just thought that this internet thing was weird or how could you use it? But I think we all can agree that the internet has revolutionized our lives. And it's going to keep going. And that is my same prediction of blockchain technology. It's going to go. Let's talk a little bit about Generation X. And the only reason I'm saying is, again, I'm emphasizing again, I'm not saying Generation X is that good. Everyone competes. Everyone has the best generation. But I do really think that the boomer generation sucks. And generations like World War II, no, I don't think they would have ever fought against Nazi Germany if they were alive today. But they answered the call. They answered the call like patriots, and they said, I will die for my country. Don't think that evil Germany, that's a different topic. They answered the call. So I do agree. Or maybe the best generation is probably George Washington, our founding fathers, the people who founded America, probably them. But the baby boom generation they're probably really got to be low on the shitbag status of not exactly the best. Is generation that great? I don't know. I'm probably biased about it. But either way, if you're Generation X and you're proud, we are part of the leadership or soon to be the leadership mantle of America. America's not doing very well. So who do you blame? You blame us. And that's what I'm saying. And I think the future generations of white men, young white men, are going to learn the mistakes of older white men. And I think they're going to become ruthless in a good way. And they're going to learn from our mistakes. So I want to set it off the bat. I'm not saying Generation X is all that great. We fucked up and look at this country, but it is what it is. Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues.
People talk about Gen Z and millennials, but there is one generation quietly holding everything together, and almost no one talks about them. Gen X grew up before the internet, survived the transition into the digital world, and learned early that no one was really coming to rescue them. Psychologically, they are a generation shaped by being left alone, learning fast, and becoming strong without much praise. Gen X grew up between two worlds. They remember life before smartphones, before social media, before constant connection. But they were also young enough to adapt when technology suddenly took over everything. That created a very specific mindset, flexible, realistic, and deeply self-reliant. Many of them learned early not to expect much help from systems, from institutions, or even from adults. A common Gen X childhood scene.
So the reason what I'm saying this too is this is kind of human intelligence or espionage 101. It's called political intelligence, but our adversaries are researching Americans. We don't do very good. What we do in the intelligence community is we'll look at political leaders. So for instance, Xi Jinping and Putin, we will do a deep dive on these leaders. I just don't think we do a good, I don't even think American intelligence knows China very well. I've said this many times. But the point being is if you are our adversary, you're going to realize that Generation X is going to be the next leaders of America. And you're going to study and study. But remember Sun Tzu, know yourself before you know your enemy. So it is good if you're Generation X or if you're an American to know who are these next leaders in America going to be. I do think from my leadership experience, I do think we're probably going to be better than the baby boom generation. Yes, I have a bias on them. I'm not very impressed with the baby boom generation. But I also want to say, I'm not on the bandwagon just because I'm Generation X. I know we're all biased and Generation X is all great because look at the country. We're not doing very well. And I'm not impressed with the Generation X men, even these MAGA. But I do want to know is from an intelligence standpoint, other countries do it on us. Even though we're not doing it on them, we could do it on ourselves. We have to understand who are we? Who is an American? The difficulty doing it in America versus, say, China is we are so diverse in America. It still is hard to put us in one group. You got a black guy, Generation X, you got a homosexual. Where China, it's actually easier because they're so homogeneous. So it's still going to be difficult to say Generation X is this. The baby boom generation, it's easier. Why? Because when you go earlier and earlier in American history, our country was more and more homogeneous. Now, I don't even know the Generation Z or Y, like whatever you get to the earlier or the later generations in America, it's more diverse now. So if you're, a 20-year-old kid, you grew up in a much more diverse environment than I did. With everything was like when I grew up, you were either straight or gay or bisexual. If I remember correct, it's like three. You're either straight, you're gay, or you're bisexual. Now, I hear this shit now. I hear, I'm pansexual, I'm sociosexual. Now, even the races, you're either white or you're black. Now there's all these mixed races too. So because America is becoming more and more diversified, it is harder to say what your generation is. Why? Because you have different experiences, a man versus a woman versus your ethnicity. Also religion. Go back in America, it was mostly Christian. Now look at New York. I think it's probably going to turn into a Muslim city. So the point is, I think you get my point. Because America is becoming more and more diversified, it is much harder to say, you're Generation Y or whatever, you're a millennial, so you're this, and this. It's so diversified, which is why I've said many times, I don't know what an American is anymore. It is so diversified. You would think an American is, if an American military veteran, West Point grad says, I have government corruption report, my passport's flagged, and I'm not wanted back in America. That should just be fucking boom. I mean, what? But for me to be shadow banned and censored and ignored by MAGA, I don't think we have a good feel anymore who's an American. I don't understand America anymore. And the more we have this unknown, what does that lead in leadership? Decline. Because what do you need in order to prosper in a country? You need stability. You have to have knowns. So our unknowns are increasing and our instability is increasing, which goes along to our economy. I think it's going to get really bad. But what is that saying, which is true? Hard times create hard men or strong men, which is part of the reason why I think baby boomers are some of the weakest cucks around. So in some ways, to the younger white men, we, to include Generation X, have fucked up America, totally fucked it up, and we deserve blame. The good thing is we're going to give you a shit sandwich, meaning we are going to give you a really hard life. You don't have to join the army. You don't have to go to ranger school. You're going to have your own ranger school in the world. And if you survive, you're going to be a much harder, stronger man than any of my pussy generation is, and definitely the baby boom generation. That's sort of the light at the end of the tunnel, the best I can say.
Is simple. You come home from school. The house is empty. The key is under the mat. The TV is on. Maybe there's a note on the table. No phone to check in. No one asking how your day was right away. You figure things out on your own. Psychologists often call Gen X the latchkey generation. That early independence trained them to manage themselves, solve problems alone, and regulate their emotions without much guidance. As adults, this often shows up as discipline, calm under pressure, and comfort being on their own. At the same time, Gen X grew up surrounded by broken trust. Vietnam, Watergate, economic recessions, layoffs, and political scandals taught them a clear lesson early on. Big promises often fail. Institutions don't always protect people. Authority.
That's the one thing I want to give the younger generations. I feel like now a bit of a father figure, or when I was in the military, like you're an officer and you're giving advice to your young soldiers. And that is, if you're young, if you're a young American man, and again, my audience is mostly white men. I mean, I would be happy to have civilized, polite debates. If you're a Black American man or an Asian man, definitely if you're a Chinese man, you're going to get smoked, but I'd be happy to talk with you. But anyway, I'm trying to give advice, and that is, if you have this belief, and that's what we had, Generation X, on this thing called the Constitution, right? You're screwed. Or if you have this belief in the legal system. And I think if you're a young white man, you're starting to see that the system is cracking. But my best advice to you, which wasn't in my case growing up, I had a much more stable America growing up, is I'm telling you, if you have this blind faith or belief in the American system, the American dream, the Constitution, the legal system, I am telling you, you are walking down a suicide path. You need to start realizing that this system is going to collapse, and you need to depend on yourself. What does that mean? I don't know, things like gold, things like guns, things like a strong body through exercise, things like very loyal friends where the quantity may be small, but the loyalty is high, where stuff like race is real. That wasn't in my generation. Race is not real. Race is real. Where gender, again, I should do stories on my dating game when I was younger, because I didn't have this knowledge, where people, if you're a man, 99% of women, if you are not more powerful than the woman, she will not respect you. It is biologically engineered in her. I didn't know this growing up. I thought equality, everything. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're a younger man, almost like a father figure talking to younger generations, this system is collapsing. And to protect you and your loved ones, but remember, for loved ones, you have to trust them and they have to trust you. So think of quality versus quantity. I am telling you, you need to think about something called self-reliance. and stop assuming that the president, that this thing called the police or the Constitution or the legal system or anything, we are going to start becoming more self-reliant, and America's going to split. That's the one thing. That stuff would never happen to me. Like when I talked about leaving America, it just started to think about it in 2005. When I grew up in America, never would have a thought. When I grew up in America until the year 2005, when I was in the FBI, the thought of a civil war, the thought of great America collapsing, the thought of leaving America, that was like the most ridiculous thing. I'm like, why? But I'm telling you, since I've left, what has this country been? It's getting worse and worse. Don't many times listen to the cucks of Generation X or even the baby boom generation. They have steered this country into a fucking toilet bowl. And I'm telling you, the best advice is start becoming self-reliant. Build your tribe. Think of quality, not quantity. And when you think of quality, think of loyalty. There's a great leadership phrase, and the phrase goes, when there's courage, there is no loneliness. When there is loyalty, there is love. Think about these things. You're going to have to do it. My generation has fucked up this country. As pathetic as it is, we're going to have to leave it to the younger generation, like our children. You're going to have to fix it. That's really what's going to happen.
Doesn't always deserve loyalty. Because of this, many Gen Xers developed a skeptical, realistic view of the world. They don't blindly believe slogans. They don't easily trust systems. They watch, wait, and judge by results. This mix of independence and skepticism shaped a very practical psychology. Gen X tends to focus on what actually works. They value skills over hype, effort over image, and results over talk. They are usually willing to work hard, but only if that work leads.
I'm going to stop it there. I'm not disagreeing with this at all, but let me just put a couple things. We only have 2 videos. I'm going to talk more, but this is a video here. If anyone disagrees with me on how this country has gone to shit. And it's like we learned in the military, at least old school leadership. If something is going wrong, who do you blame? You blame the officers. You blame the officers. Same thing like I said when I don't want to go off on a tangent, but you always go back, meaning 99% of the problems in America, I blame the white man. Why? Who founded America? White men. Western, European, heterosexual, Christian, white men. We founded it, people. Our ancestors did. They brought the torch and they carried it on to us. And what did we do? Not necessarily you if you're a younger person, but the older, we fucked it up through weakness, through greed. It has to come back, meaning if this problem is going to be fixed, we have to go back. Who made America great? And no, even guys like Donald Trump that still have this capital. Remember, Donald Trump never served in the military. He's a draft dodger along with his kids. You know, him and his prostitute wife want to push their fucking shit movie. He's not a good example, but I still think he's the best we have. But anyway, we have to go back to the basics. That's who made America great. And in the future, who's going to correct the problem? Those same type of people. The people that say we have Christian faith. We're heterosexual. We are white European men. That's how it's going to be, people. And if you disagree with me, if George Washington was alive today, what advice would he give you? Think about that. What advice? Would he totally agree with MAGA? I don't think he would. I don't think he would agree with MAGA. So here, let's watch this quick video on what I'm telling you, how America is falling apart. It's falling. And when Donald Trump, with all of his rich oligarchy friends who now want to rebuild Gaza and put a Trump plaza. You know what I'm getting at. Where's America first? Makes no sense. There's still a sense, even with Donald Trump, where he's favoring his rich oligarch buddies, and still the American citizen is being left to hang. You watch this quick video. You tell me if this is fucked up in America.
America's newest side hustle isn't your usual gig. And it tells a prickly story about the U.S. economy. People selling blood just to get by.
It was out of necessity.
Like Ian Pleasant, who started donating at this center outside Philadelphia after being hit by a car and breaking his leg.
It was a lifesaver. It even paid my rent.
A lifesaver for him and the patients on the other end, with researchers saying the U.S. provides around 70% of the world's plasma, that gooey substance that transports the essential cells and nutrients our body needs. Ian is one of an estimated 200,000 people that walk into plasma centers like this every day across the country to sell their blood plasma for money.
People will come in and use this money to supplement their income. For a lot of people, it's their lifeline to afford that little thing that's extra.
A booming market worth more than $30 billion now, pumping through the veins of American households. Collections up about.
Yeah, soon we're going to be selling our organs. People are going to sell a kidney here, a kidney there. This is the American dream, people. While Donald Trump is in Mar-a-Lago eating steak and lobster with his rich kids.
30% in the last 3 years. There are now more plasma centers than Costco's across the nation.
The U.S. has a really incredible demand for this product, and it obviously saves a lot of lives and helps a lot of people.
Filling that demand are cash-strapped Americans, ranging from college students who told Rolling Stone they were looking for some extra cash to afford Harry Styles tickets, to middle-class workers struggling with rising costs and a slowing job market. Jill Chamberlain in Scottsdale, Arizona, used to make $87,000 a year overseeing the finances for a local business until she was laid off in August 2024. Now she works more than 80 hours a week to barely cover her bills. Twice a week before work, she sells her plasma.
Everything that I get from here or the other overtime jobs is food. It's power, it's gas in my car, it's car insurance. One day it will fix my sunroof.
Chamberlain makes about $400 a month from her plasma, but she says it leaves her exhausted and frustrated.
I chickened out for the first 2 months. I went and then backed out and went and backed out, and it was just too scary.
You were afraid to do it?
Yeah, there's a lot of stigma attached to it, and I wanted to find other solutions before I went that far.
Critics say the plasma sellers getting about $50 a session isn't enough, and point out that the U.S. is one of the few countries that allows payment for plasma and for people to sell as often, twice a week. But plasma companies say they're meeting a critical need.
Yes, the companies make billions when they collect plasma, but guess what? Donors receive billions in return. And the other nice thing about this is that these plasma centers are located in the communities that need that money the most.
Peter Jaworski is a researcher at Georgetown University studying the ethics and economics of blood plasma collection. He says compensation is key to the system working.
If we did not compensate donors, the whole world would have a massive shortage.
Selling plasma is generally considered safe, but side effects include fatigue, dizziness, and in rare cases, severe reactions. And there's limited data on what frequent long-term donation does to the body. But for Jill, it's not just about the physical effects. It's about working more than ever and still coming up short.
We always heard the middle class was disappearing, but really, really quickly. The rich are getting richer, and the rest of us are sinking quickly.
A rapidly growing industry built on life-saving science and the blood.
A couple of things. Let's talk about that. First, our World War II veterans, if they were alive today, would they be satisfied with America? Would they be happy that they went to war and fought against Germany and stuff? I think no. Second thing is, well, people just got to do what they got to do to make money. So I guess your daughter's going to be on OnlyFans too. Maybe let's get to the bottom of this. Why are we so broke? Here's Leadership 101. And this is the same thing where these faggot capitalists, and again, these are not capitalism anymore. These are globalist oligarchy scumbags. But it would make sense if America's economy was dropping also for the top 1%. The problem is, and it's Leadership 101, we know this. How can we have a country where the middle class or anyone, basically, the bottom 99%, it's getting harder and harder to survive. But at the same time, the top 1% makes more and more money. It doesn't make any sense. This would be unethical. This is not a country. Meaning it would make sense if even our leaders, Donald Trump, they're all taking a hits, but it's not. So we're living in a country where who's getting squeezed? Not the 1%. They're making more money, but yet us in the middle class or lower again, and people think, and if you disagree with this, you're called a communist. By these stupid MAGA people like, oh, you don't support capitalism. This is not capitalism anymore. The same thing where you hear these stupid debates about taxes. where these corporations or these rich people say, you don't understand, these corporations pay a lot in taxes. Then let's just end all taxes. Then let's roll the dice then. These corporations and these high net worth individuals bullshit us and they say they pay more taxes than us, the lower income. Then let's just end it because they should want it. Let's just end all taxes. They don't. They manipulate the system. But this is not good. Where is it going to go where people need more and more money? And I keep saying this. If a country is not able to reproduce and have children, which we don't, that's why we get immigration. Even the far right, or not the far right, even the normal right, MAGA people, they love legal immigration. So if you're a country and you cannot reproduce yourself, it's not a viable country. And it hasn't been. That's why even the left and the right, they both like immigration. It's not a viable system. Let's watch one more video and then I'm going to put some leadership on here. And what I want to do in this last video is, no, we're not doing a cry story for Generation X. This video is like how Generation, because I could see now that if you're a white older man, which would include me, nobody wants to hear any complaints. The left doesn't like you. The right doesn't like you. No one fucking likes you. So the best way you're going to do as a white man is you better fucking get hardcore. And people are not going to like you. But the point being is this system is going down. Everyone's getting screwed, except it seems to be the top 1%. And who is also in this top 1%? Donald Trump. And Donald Trump also loves cheap, legal immigration. Who cleans his hotels, his Mar-a-Lago? His system could not run without cheap immigrant labor. It couldn't run on it. So don't fool yourself. He's basically a CEO. He's running the country like a CEO, which in some ways is okay, like I said, but it's not nationalism. Because at the end of the day, he's looking out for the big hit. And I've said this before, but when Donald Trump, the man, the sort of sleazy business issues, I don't like it. But you also got to take it with a grain of salt. It comes with the package of these high testosterone, you could almost say, alpha males. But when his wife, Melania, which in many ways I look at her as a prostitute, look at her past on what she did. She sold sex for money and influence. But when she markets and uses the White House to market her shit movie, it's even worse because that's not what women should be. She should be behind closed doors, helping out the country in many ways, but she's like, no, I want to use the White House and I want to become like they don't have enough money. Literally, like they don't have enough money. She's like, no, I want to use the White House. I don't know how much she made on that movie, $50 million or something like that. It's disgusting now. It's disgusting what's going on, but it's going to get worse. This last video, and then we're going to talks about how Generation X is fucked. I get it. I'm not asking for any sympathy. I see a lot of people wouldn't like Generation X, but we'll just see. It's a short video and I'll just skip around in it.
Generation X.
Generation X describes people who are born between roughly 1965 and 1980. Every generation seems to think that they are the cursed generation. So, for example, Gen Z will say, our childhood has been ruined by social media and smartphones. Millennials will say, we can't buy a house. Baby boomers will say, our retirement is very uncertain. But what I've kind of discovered is that really the true losers in the generational war are Generation X.
So tell me what it is that makes us Generation X really so unusual.
So one thing that's unusual about Generation X.
Man, I just thought about it. I should have put this clip in. Do you remember that movie called Falling Down? And I believe it was Kirk Douglas was the main actor. I don't remember when it came out. I think it came out in the 90s. I'm guessing in the 90s. And I don't remember what the reaction was in that movie. But are you telling me that is not a good, because I guess Kirk Douglas back then maybe would have been Generation X, maybe he would have been a baby boomer that day. Well, whatever, you get my point. But you're telling me that Falling Down movie didn't have a lot of examples of what's happening now in America. Well, I should have put clips in that movie. I've mentioned that movie a couple times in videos before. Again, it's called Falling Down. I think it's Kirk Douglas, if I remember the name correctly. And it's basically a pissed off white man. And I think back then, because life was still good in America, so like, oh, this guy's just complaining. Are you kidding me? I think a lot of that stuff in the movie was very prophetic on what's happening now. But we're losing it. We've lost our families. We've lost Christianity. We're losing the middle class. We're losing our freedom. Me as a military veteran, I look to these other military. What are you fighting for now? We don't even have freedom of speech, the amount of censorship that I've gotten. But that movie called Falling Down, if there is one movie that I would sort of pick among many, but one movie that I said, you know something, that has got a lot of prophetic images. And I would almost be interested to talk with the director of that movie. How was he able to think about it back then? And what would be the reaction? What was the reaction of audiences back then? And then what if that movie was played again now? Or if they did a remake or something like that? What would modern day white men think in America of that movie Falling Down? There's a lot of stuff, but I think there's going to be a lot of white men, especially older men like me, who realize this system has fucked them over. And the best advice I have for younger generation is don't be fooled like we were. They're fooled into this government, this patriotism bullshit. I mean, we are a globalist corporation. That is what America is. We don't have morals in America. We are not a Christian nation anymore. Christianity is fucking dead in America. And if you don't think so, you're a moron. It is all about the money. Why are people serving the military? They are government mercenaries. FBI and the CIA the same way. And a lot of these MAGA people now have turned into a cult too. They're just into this cult, this guy named Donald Trump. And I like Donald Trump. I've said I still believe he's the best president of my entire lifetime. But man, he's got a lot of this sleazy globalist corporate capitalism that is the same slimy bullshit that has taken our country down. We'll keep going on this.
Is that no one is really that interested in them. So if you look, for example, at the number of books that have been written about Generation X, or even things like the number of times that people search for Generation X online compared with, say, searching for baby boomers, they're just much less popular, basically. They're also much less likely than any other generation to know that they are themselves part of Generation X. And so there's this weird thing where they've kind of vanished from public consciousness.
So why should we be thinking about them?
Gen X are at a tricky age at the moment. There's this theory called the U-bend of life theory, which actually has quite a lot of academic support. And basically what this says is that you're pretty happy when you're young and you're pretty happy when you're old, but you're pretty miserable when you're in middle age. So there was a recent poll by Ipsos which found that roughly a third of Gen Xers are either not very happy or not happy at all. Now, the question is, why does this happen? There's a few reasons. One is that some chronic health issues begin to emerge in middle age. People kind of come to realize that they're not going to achieve all they want to achieve in their career. And also they're at this tricky stage where often they have to look after both children and parents. So it's not surprising that people find those years to be particularly difficult.
So those are the age-dependent things, but you're also talking about a slightly different cohort effect, right?
Yes, so there's...
Yeah, we're going to end it there. Because she talked about, I get what it is. I mean, if you're Generation X and you're satisfied with this country, well, then let's see where this thing goes. But I keep saying, if the systems are working properly, well, then we probably shouldn't be going to civil war. We probably shouldn't be going to revolution, and we probably shouldn't be going to collapse. And you may be thinking, yes, David, we're not. I think America is going to do fine. And it is. Maybe it is. And then I'm wrong. But if it does go to collapse, revolution, or civil war, which I think it will be, then something wasn't working right. Something wasn't working right. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to finally give my leadership. You know, I talk about leadership all the time, but I realize I've never given a definition of leadership yet. And I'm going to do it. And this is, I think I wrote this in my book. I can't remember. I think I should have wrote this in my book because it's talking about leadership. But I'm going to talk about what is leadership. And it's going to be 3 dimensions. Now, this is coming from my own thoughts and my years and years of study leadership. So I don't know if anyone else has ever said this definition. If they are, I'm not copywriting them at all. And I'd be interested. It's amazing we have the same opinion. But this is coming from my own research. This is not from anyone else. For instance, as you know, General Schwarzkopf, which I look upon General Schwarzkopf as probably being the last good modern general, he defined leadership in terms of competence and character. I have a little different technique. And so what I'm trying to do is, the reason I'm giving this definition is generally speaking, I believe the baby boom generations have really fucked up America. Generation X, we fucked it up too. So what am I doing? Sort of like that military leader and a father figure, I'm trying to give leadership to the younger generations and say, learn the mistakes that we did and good luck with you because we screwed it up. Do better than we did. And what is leadership? The first is leadership is composed of 3 dimensions. Now I picked 3 because 3 is an easy number to remember. When I did Army ROTC, and I did very well in Army ROTC when I became commissioned, they had 16 leadership dimensions. I don't quite know if I could remember them off the top of my head. I had to when I was in Army ROTC. 16 is a lot. It can get confusing. So I'm focusing on 3. This is probably could be one of the best leadership classes you're ever going to get, even though I'm censored. So if you're ever going to listen to what I'm saying, this would be very good to listen now. It could change your life. We don't get it. There's 3 different dimensions. The first 2, if you could succeed with the first 2, you will be a successful person. But this is also the definition of a sociopath. We know many people in America and the world are very successful, but you could describe them as scumbags. They're sociopaths. They will step on you. They will cheat you. They'll do whatever they can. But at the end of the day, they are successful, but they're not leaders. Why? Because if we could have it, we would kill them. Sort of like the emperor of Rome getting assassinated. But here are the 3, and I'm doing them by priority. The first one is called intelligence. Now, you've heard it many times in America that the secret to success is hard work. I'm telling you that's bullshit. I'm going to give you an example. People who work at McDonald's, that's a pretty hard work. People who you may not understand about the military, but there's this job in the military called 11 Bravo, an infantry soldier. That's pretty hard work being an infantryman. I'll tell you the stories when I trained on them. Infantry soldiers also have the lowest test scores for ASVAB, meaning it's the lowest intelligence level to get into the military. But it's pretty hard work being an infantryman. It's the same thing, I don't know, being a construction man outside. So the point being is there are plenty of people that do really, really hard work, but they're not very successful. Why? Because they're not very smart. In fact, if you wanted to do one of the biggest differences between an officer and an enlisted guy is you better be intelligent. One of the worst things you can have your enlisted say is, boy, that LT, that captain, our commander, he seems kind of stupid. He seems kind of dumb. That's not good. So one of the things you have to be intelligent. I believe so. Like Elon Musk, when he brags about how hard does he work, I think a lot of it's bullshit. I believe first and foremost, these are extremely intelligent people, along with some other stuff. And oh, by the way, when you're doing stuff, when you're the commander, when you have your own company, when you're making all the profits, it's easier to work harder. It's yours. So that whole thing about, yeah, I could work hard. Yeah, when it's your ship, when it's your business, when you're doing stuff you like to do, you'll naturally work harder. But the number one thing to success is intelligence. If you study anyone, even in the Jews, I'm going to give you an example in Israel. There's many different types of ethnicities of Jewish. There's Sephardic, Mizrahi, and then there's something called the Ashkenazis. The Ashkenazis are considered the European Jews. We're not going to get in an argument. Some people say they're not really Jews, they're Kharzais. I'm not going to argue with you. Maybe you're right. But anyway, just go with me. In Israel, the leadership, the main leadership in Israel are what's called the Ashkenazi Jews. They have the highest level IQ. So when I think of successful people getting into West Point, I know getting into West Point very well. It took me 3 tries to get into West Point. So I knew the entire admissions process. Getting into West Point, it's in 3 categories: academic, leadership, and physical fitness. Academic is 60% to get into West Point. The next is leadership. For instance, I was an Eagle Scout in Boy Scouts. That gives you points. If you were the president of student council, all these things in high school, there's all these leadership points, 30%. And guess what? You have to take a physical fitness test to get into West Point. It's not like the Army test, but it's sort of like that. You do pull-ups, you do sprinting. It's only 10%. Why? Because they don't want stupid people as West Pointers. I agree. So the first thing is intelligence. But at the same time, intelligence can be broken up into 2 factors. I use a lot of this military jargon because it's easy to explain, but it's the same thing in the civilian world. In the military, you have what's called technical experts. These would be warrant officers. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Warrant officers are kind of below me, but they're above enlisted guys. And then you have senior enlisted guys like the sergeants. Those are the technical experts. When I was in the military and you could say, hey, Lieutenant Baumblatt, this howitzer 245, I don't know how does this thing work? I don't fucking know. Get the warrant officer here, get the sergeant. They have technical expertise. Think of them as the mechanic, the electrician. They know that weapon system very well, and they should. What should I know? You have to understand the conceptuality of the big picture. So if you're running a company, it's the same thing. You're a father, and they could say, hey, how exactly do you make baby food? You better make baby food right, because if you make it wrong, I don't know. That's what my wife does. She understands the baby food. I don't fucking know, but all I know is I protect and I provide. And I provide also the education, meaning you have to be intelligent enough to understand the big picture. And what is that big picture? Mission, objectives, organization, basically strategy and organization. Sort of what Donald Trump is. And many people have argued with him that he's a stupid person. I think many ways in the technical aspects, Donald Trump is either stupid or he doesn't care. That's normal. But in the broader range of the strategic view, you have got to be smart. You have to understand. So that's one, is make no doubt about it. I believe the most successful trait that a person can have for success is intelligence. That's who we are. Is there also a difference in terms of races? It is what it is. It's a different discussion, but I'm telling you. So the number one thing of understanding leadership is your intelligence. Now, the problem is there's a lot of DNA involved in intelligence, but you could also learn. But what you want to do is understand. Now, you can also become a technical expert. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to lead people, you don't lead things, you lead people, you lead groups, you lead companies, you lead employees in a company, you lead citizens in a country. You have to be able to conceptualize the mission. And Donald Trump as president, it's very difficult. He's looking at basically the two building blocks, security and economic, but it's intelligent. We could do another video, go on it. The first is intelligence. The second, no fucking fear. I could do a movie when I reported my platoon. I reported my platoon, and this is part of it. And when I mention that is when I talk about no fear, it is not about you being a big, tough person. It helps. I'm 6'5", and I was the captain of the heavyweight captain of the West Point boxing team. It helps. Same thing like presidents or tall people, but you don't have to do it. The main thing you have to have is no fear. So I'm going to give you an example. When I reported to my platoon, it was sort of out of the movies in an interesting way. I reported to Germany, but my platoon was already pre-deployed in what's called, I'm forgetting these terms, it was called CMTC, Combat Maneuver Training. It's really when we're doing war games. My post was called Baumholder, sort of like my last name. My troops were already pre-deployed. So they were already getting ready for deployment. And as you can imagine in the movies, they were in this big barracks of all bunk beds. The officers were in a separate quarters, but all the enlisted were coming. And they knew that 2 West Point lieutenants, me and my buddy, were going to report there and be platoon leaders. They knew about it. And we learned this from West Point. We said, when you first initially make contact with your platoon, it's one of the biggest things. They're going to judge you. And I said, fuck it. I'm going to break the ice pretty quick. I always carry my boxing equipment with me. I show up there. There's like over 80 to 100 people in this huge big bay. It's almost like World War II barracks because it's a pre-deploy. Everyone's on bunk beds. And they see me and the other classmate at West Point come in there, and I was quick. I'm like, second platoon. I believe I was second platoon leader. My buddy was first platoon leader. And I said, gentlemen, my name's Lieutenant Baumblatt. I'm going to be the platoon leader. And you can imagine, just like the movies, they're like, who's this dipshit? Like, you kind of hear it. And I said, anyone box around here? Who's a boxer? And I knew what they were going to say. Sure enough, he's a boxer. He was all Army. I said, I got my boxing gloves. Let's box. So I put him on the spot. And what did I do? In a nice way, I beat the shit out of them. So what did I do? I cut the ice, and I immediately got their respect. You don't have to do that, though. You don't. Because it's possible, even me at 50 years old, there's going to be a time where you're not the toughest guy in the room. But think about a Napoleon. You need to look at those men and say, listen, I don't care how big I am, I am not afraid. I'm not afraid to let my career go down the toilet, meaning with my superiors. I'm not afraid of you physically punching me, because if you do, I'm going to get my gun. I'm going to blow your brains out. They have to feel of a fearless leader. Fearless. That doesn't mean you have to have big muscles and you can fight, but they need to know that you are fearless. You will take your career and fucking throw it in the toilet, meaning you will stand up to anyone. They have to sense a fearlessness. There's probably a correlation with testosterone with that. Those, and we can explain other videos. So those are the first two elements. You show me a person who's really smart, who's fearless, and guess what? They're going to be successful, but they might be a sociopath. And a sociopath is not a leader. But a sociopath, we know these people. They're also in our government. They're successful, but they're called scumbags. And they will stab you in the back. So what's the third element of leadership? The first element is intelligence. The second element is that sense of fearlessness. Regardless of how big you are, if you know, it helps. That's what I'm saying. It helps if you learn some martial art, but you don't need it. Kind of think of a mafia person. They need to feel that you are fearless, that you will die any day, that you don't care about your career. They need to feel that sense of fearlessness. That's the second. The third element, what is it? It's called loyalty. We're not talking about Christianity, though I have nothing against Christianity and I'm pro-Christian. It has nothing to do with this thing called the Constitution. They need to feel that if you're going to lead them, they are part of your tribe, your family, and you have loyalty to them. Not necessarily that you have loyalty to other people outside their tribe. So as the president of the United States, Donald Trump, when he said America first, what do we expect? We expect him to put American citizens, which this tribe is too diverse now. It's not going to work. It's going to split. But in general, we want a sense of loyalty, which we don't. Our government is full of traitors. They will put Israel before us in any day. As long as the money's there, they will sell us out. But if you have these three characteristics that your people know, that they say, you know something, he is very intelligent. He doesn't know his ass from his elbow on this engine block. And I don't even think he knows about this weapon system, or even I don't think he understands how this computer program works. But in the general strategy, in the general organization, this guy is sharp, intelligent. Two, you need to be fearless. You could be a short guy. You could have small muscles, whatever. It hurts you a little bit. You could still overcome it, but you need to be fearless. You need to be able to say, if tomorrow I die, fuck it, I die. No one's going to fucking push me around, to include my commanders. And if that means putting my career on the line and flushing it down the toilet, I don't give a fuck. I'm not afraid of anything. That's respect. They'll give that. And the third, they will follow you to battle and they will die for you. But they need to know you are loyal to them. If they don't have that feeling, it's not going to work. And now you're called a sociopath. Those are the three levels of leadership. That's never been told before. And if it is, that's coming from all my years of experience. And if anyone looks at those three and puts them together and thinks our United States government has that, if Wall Street has it, if Silicon Valley has it, meaning these are the people who run us, or God forbid, the FBI and the CIA, and even how pathetic it is, even West Point doesn't have it anymore. It's not. And we don't have leadership. And I don't believe we're going to relearn these leadership lessons until guns and ammo are going to come. Why? That same story of hard times. As you like it or not, the reason we don't see a change as bad as it is because you haven't seen anything yet. The system is going to have to get worse before it gets better. It's the same thing with a man. When do you see a hero in times of danger? When you see that building burning is then when you might see a hero come and save a woman out of a burning building. But there needs to be danger before a hero can come. Sometimes with leadership, that same process, until you feel that this system is destroying itself, when danger is coming and you say, we need a leader. I'm not changing the subjects, but we all know even cuck MAGA people, when you mention the name Adolf Hitler. But part of the reason why Adolf Hitler was able to become who he was, if you go back to that time in Germany, the Weimar Republic, Germany was basically a toilet bowl. It was bad. And bad times require strong leaders. You have not seen it yet. And I like Donald Trump, but what did I say? The best is yet to come. This country is going to get worse and worse and worse. And you're going to see a new form of leadership. And I don't believe it's going to be unified. That's going to bring the country together. It'll split. It is what it is. But you haven't. But if you want to see strong leadership, you're going to need to see strong problems, or we'll say big problems. But when everything, and that's the same thing we say in the military, there are wartime generals and peacetime generals. And we really haven't had a war. These are just war games. That's why these generals don't care. Afghanistan, Iraq, if you're a military veteran who died in the cemetery, in the graveyard, they don't care. They don't care because it wasn't a real war. It's a war game. It's all about games. But generally speaking, peacetime generals are administrative generals. They're managers. Wartime general. Think of a guy like Penn. When there's war, when the country is literally dependent on its survival, they want to unleash the dogs of hell, and they want guys like General Penn. I knew it was in me. This is who I am. And when I was in the military, I realized it was an absolute joke. It was corrupt and incompetent. And what's the only thing I realized? I'm quitting. I'm out. I thought the FBI was going to be better. Same shit, even worse in many ways. And I just quit. The reason we're not seeing top leaders yet is I'm telling you, the system's not getting worse. The same reason, if you're a MAGA, we both agree, I do believe Donald Trump is the best president in my entire life. Why? Because if Donald Trump tried to run as president back in the 1980s, the 1990s, when it was the good times in America, he would not have won. Why? Because Americans would say, this guy's a racist, I'm not going to tolerate. But when Donald Trump chose to run as a president, the scenario was already getting right. That people in America were already starting to realize this system's not working, it's getting worse, and we want a strong leader. Sure, he's politically incorrect. He says some stuff that might be overboard. We don't care. We want a strong leader. And I'm telling you, this situation is going to get worse and worse. And everything that I've said now, that I guarantee I've been censored, and a lot of people haven't helped me out because they use the same cuck terminology of, well, I'd like to help out David, but the guy's just a racist. Keep it up, because when this problem in America gets worse, you don't care. Because I'm telling you, General Patton, which I believe is probably one of the best generals that America's ever produced, you ask yourself, if General Patton was alive today in the U.S. Army, would he survive? He wouldn't. He'd be fired. General Patton would be fired from the United States Army for politically correct reasons. But we know that General Patton is the best of the best. Why? Sometimes leadership and environment, or the situation, has got to go hand in hand. For the same reason, I don't believe a guy like Adolf Hitler would have ever become the Chancellor of Germany in another time. But the situation was right. And when the situation gets really, really bad, you don't care. You want strong leaders that will get the job done. Donald Trump presented himself like that. But the problem is what's that last issue on leadership? I believe he's intelligent. I believe he's fearless in many ways. Remember when he took a bullet in the ear? He has more courage than most of the military officers. But that last one, loyalty, I'm wondering, is it truly with American citizens? Is he compromised with other things, with this Epstein? But I'm going to end it here. We'll do more videos. But if you could understand those three concepts of intelligence, of fearlessness, and loyalty, then you will have the building blocks to understand leadership. And then if you can understand that, then you can understand my situation on why the systems aren't working. I should never be here. I should never be speaking here. And that faggot Navy SEAL, and I'm using him to show how horrible the military leadership is. That faggot Navy SEAL, Van Orden, who's a congressman, you're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. And you know the right thing to do. If a military veteran says he's got military corruption, same thing with this guy, Morgan Luttrell, who's another Navy SEAL piece of shit in Texas. You know about me, Morgan. I beat your fucking ass in. What you people are doing is wrong. And sooner or later, if America thinks a revolution is going to happen, I'm telling you, there's going to be a military coup that's going to happen because our military is going to split. And sooner or later, Americans are going to realize what leadership means. And if you think I'm wrong, who is probably the premier leader of America? Probably George Washington, I would nominate. And you ask yourself, if George Washington was alive today, would he take this shit? No way. And what would he say? He'd say, well, during my time, me and the men, we used guns and ammo to solve this problem. And I'm telling you, the same thing's going to happen now. Until then, I appreciate your support. If you could click like, send this out. I appreciate it. David Baumblatt from Terrabins Leadership, telling the Patriots lead to victory.